Good morning. It is 9:30 a.m. on Sunday, December 8th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis, and just got up more or less. Have been poking around, playing with some stuff. Realized that Windows had reset an audio setting that had been messing up my audio in a way that I would been struggling to figure out for a little while, and hopefully that's fixed now. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just making me occasionally clip more often, which is frustrating. Anyway, today's Sunday, which means I'm continuing my rewatch of Cowboy Bebop with Session 10, Ganymede Elegy. This is a Jet-focused episode, as we saw in the preview last time. And so we are focused a little bit on some of Jet's backstory, a little bit of some of his history, how he became the man he is today. We actually begin the episode, though, starting to go ahead and give an impression of what Ed is like on the Bebop, which is just as delightfully weird as you'd expect and that I remembered. And yeah, so what we actually start first is that we've got the Bebop has caught a bounty. He's tied up. This guy is tied up on the ship, and Ein is barking at him. And then the guy kicks a soda can at Ein. Oh no! And then, probably drawn by that noise, we have to imagine, Ed sort of drops out of a port upside down onto the guy's head, does somersaults back and forth, lays on the floor, grabs and hugs him like she's about to kiss him, then bites his ear. When he shakes her off, she bites his leg, and all the while, Ein is just watching this going, what a weirdo. But yeah, it's interesting to sometimes, obviously, Ed just acts very strangely and weird just because they're practically like, they have a very alien way of thinking sometimes. It's childlike in some respects, but also sometimes there's a lot more going on there, and it's hard to say what exactly is going on. But like some of that at least seems like it might be reprisal for being mean to Ein. That's certainly the progression we see, and then her attempting to bite the guy like a dog. But in the meantime, though, the Bebop is traveling to Ganymede to turn in this particular bounty, and Faye and Spike speculate that the reason Jet is being so distracted is because Ganymede is his home satellite, and they, Faye teases him. It's like, oh, are you mooning over some girl you left behind? Did you make her cry, or did she make you cry? And Jet snaps at them, and he's mad. But we did see him looking at a pocket watch, and then we get some flashes of him finding it with a letter, a woman walking away in the rain, and it seems very clear that maybe that is exactly what happened. But he doesn't want to talk about it. He's no, you're obnoxious. He's growling like the black dog that his nickname is, apparently. But apparently the police contact they make in order to turn in the bounty is an old friend of Jet's, who tells him, hey, you remember your ex-girlfriend Elisa? And Jet's like, yeah, I guess. And it's like, well, it says she has this little cafe in this neighborhood if you wanted to go check on her. And talks about him being the black dog. So and Faye briefly comments on, it's like, oh, he was a cop. That makes sense, because it's like, why we can't get along for 5 minutes. And I mean, I think we can all agree too that it's like, yeah, that seems like it makes sense, and so we haven't really figured out yet why he isn't anymore, or if there's more complicated, because we get a little bit of an answer here that there's some reason why he left Ganymede, but is that the whole story? Obviously, I think there's later episodes where we talk more about that. But in any event, Jet goes to see her, and sees this little bar called La Fin, which means the end. And he flies down there. He had learned a little bit that like she might be having money trouble just because everyone in the neighborhood is. And so he shows up, and there's a whole motif throughout the whole episode of the idea of time standing still. Like we get a whole bunch of the establishing setting shots of this little port on Ganymede where we see people at various activities, but even if the background is moving, like we see water moving or seagulls flying, the people are not moving. And it's kind of a neat artistic effect, but it also ties into this theme of time standing still. Likewise, when Jet is talking to Elisa, there's some really interesting things where we're seeing the conversation happen in the long shot, but then we also keep getting these flashes of her face in close up. And it's again suggesting that his brain, in his mind, he's sort of seeing her face and sort of capturing these movements. And like that image, that static image is kind of what's landing in his brain. And it's just the question of like, you talk about it like time stands still, which is tied into the stopwatch. It's a neat motif, and it's a question that I think we'll come back around to when we start talking about the overall theme of the episode. But in the meantime, she teases him a little bit, lets him know that the slightly nervous young guy who's also there at the cafe is her boyfriend Rint, which he handles pretty well. But he explains like to us and reminding her that from his perspective, they were doing fine until just one day. He comes home and there's just a letter with one word, says farewell, and the pocket watch. And so from his perspective, she just left him for no reason with no explanation. And he's important, he says, I forgive you, but I want to know why. And her reaction is to say, that was so long ago, I can't really even remember, which we suspect is maybe not 100% true. But the idea that she speaks to, I think, is an important one, which is you talk about it like it's that pocket watch. You say you made a bet with yourself there on Ganymede, here on Ganymede. Once I left you, you were going to wait for me to come back until the watch stopped and then leave. But you act like the watch stopping means that nothing else was happening here. You act like you're going to come back and find me like I'm the woman who just left you. And I'm not. I've moved on. I've done other things with my life. I have a whole other life that's separate from you now. And you can't act like my life now is still defined by why I left you, even if yours still is. And it's a good question. We see the way Jet reacts here. He's clearly kind of drawn back into it, but it does sort of raise the question is like, how much is Jet's current life still defined by fact that he doesn't know why she left him? Now, sometimes in real world relationships, when a woman has to leave suddenly and mysteriously like that, it might be because the guy is abusive. So we wonder a little bit about Jet, like what is the reason? Like she doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't seem afraid or like scared or upset to see him. In fact, if anything else, it's like a pleasant reminiscing for her to see him. So it doesn't seem like if she was ever afraid of him, it doesn't seem like she is anymore. But we still have to wonder, right? What is it? Now we've seen some things about Jet, like we don't know what it is, but he does sometimes tend to be a little controlling. He's kind of a ship mom, but he's the grumpy mom archetype. He's the one that's always yelling at everybody to you're going to eat my cooking and like it, and why you leave the place a mess all the time, and I'm not, it's like that sort of thing. And so we can imagine that that's not everybody's jam. But in the meantime, though, we have the rest of the crew of the Bebop hanging out on the ship. We've got Faye getting a suntan in a ridiculous bikini, and Ed fishing. But there's a fun little sequence where Ed just continues to start trying to interact with everybody, and observing. He's like, "Why are you putting that suntan lotion on your skin?" And Faye just gives this whole speech that's like very pretentious about, like, yes, the proper care of a woman's skin is an incredibly important routine, even though we know that eventually in time it's all futile and useless. And it's just a whole like pretentious little thing. It's a very Faye thing to say. And then Ed just kind of nods, rubs her cheek on Faye's leg, and then just says, yes, I get it, futile and useless. I like Ed a lot. I'm very glad to have Ed now on the ship. But mostly, Faye and Ed aren't really participating much in the rest of the story of this episode. Spike, on the other hand, gets a call from Jet's cop buddy, Donnelly, and learns. So I thought I should let you guys know before it goes out officially, but Jet's ex-girlfriend has a current boyfriend, and he just got a bounty put on his head. And we certainly know that he was acting nervous, like he was armed. And so what we learn is that he is wanted for shooting a loan shark. And Spike is, he's not happy about that. He certainly wants to make sure Jet knows, but from his perspective, business is business, like it's a bounty. It's not my job to decide who's worth a bounty and who's not. I bring them out. I bring them in. And so, he sets out. But then we get a little bit of a shot of Jet observing Rint, who's clearly upset, like he's trying to light his cigarette and it's not going well. And we can see he's kind of compulsively doing it while he flashes back. And we see that there was kind of a scuffle and he ended up shooting a guy. So we know he did it, but that it was really kind of a complicated situation. And then sure enough, we have a scene with him and Elisa where she's basically pointing out like it was her loan and she was scared of the loan shark. So she sent him, and now he's gotten himself in trouble and she feels responsible. And now they're worried because Jet told her he's a bounty hunter. So it's like, now he's after us. And sure enough, we have Spike going after the guy. And then there's a chase with them trying, Elisa and Rint trying to flee on a boat. It's not obvious where they think they're going, especially because the ship is going to, seems like it would be relatively easy to catch them or keep up with them at the very least. It's one thing to say, I can make sure you don't get away, but it's also like it's not obvious exactly how to make them stop. Spike tries shooting at them and that doesn't go well. But yeah, so it's like there's a disconnect. Like I can fall. It's sort of like chasing a police, a runaway car in a helicopter. Like you can follow them wherever they go, but you can't really make the car stop. In any event, once Jet kind of catches up with Spike's pursuit, he tells Spike, "You leave. I'll take care of this." And to some extent, we're a little bit unsure, like what's going on. What is in Jet's head here is, Spike's guesses, like, are you going to let them get away? And we almost wonder, like, I think that we're meant to kind of hope a little bit that that's what will happen, right? Because Elisa, for sure, and is meant to be played to be sympathetic, and Rint is maybe not the best, but he also clearly cares for her and she cares for him. So by proxy, we wouldn't mind seeing them get away. But as Jet chases them down like the black dog. Once he bites, he never lets go. This whole idea of his nickname. He pursues them. He's not just shooting at them, although he does use the radio to like tell them to stop, because we can imagine that like this is a dangerous pursuit. Even just chasing them while they try to get away at high speeds risks a wreck of some kind. But he's not shooting at them until later he gets a clear shot and shoots with a harpoon so he can finally try to make the boat stop. And we want to know like what exactly is what's happening here. And we see the desperation growing in Elisa, and eventually when they're cornered, she pulls the gun on Jet, and she's saying, no, let us go, don't come any closer. And this is where he explains his reasoning, which is to say, you have to give up, because if you run, they'll send other bounty hunters after you. And then not only is it more likely that you might get killed in the pursuit, but by then you are also going to be arrested for being his accomplice. If you give up now, maybe he can still get off with a self-defense plea, and you at least won't need to be arrested. And it's logical. It makes sense, sort of. Like, will Rin actually get off with self-defense? We don't know. That might be true. It might not be. I think the episode sort of plays it like Jet's right about that, but we don't really know. We don't see it happen. But this causes her to break down, because on the one hand, she wants to get away, but she knows, like, his logic makes sense. It's true. She probably should give up, but it breaks her heart because that was exactly why she left him. We realize that there was, in many respects, this was something she had not forgotten about. She left him because she felt like she never got to make any decisions, because anytime she would suggest something, he would explain why it wasn't a good idea, and then they wouldn't do it. And so her ideas, maybe they were bad ideas, maybe they were mistakes, but she never got to make her own mistakes because he was always there to steer her back onto the right path. And on one hand, you could say, from his perspective, it's like, I'm trying to help you not make mistakes. But we could certainly imagine, in the spectrum of relationship behavior, we could imagine that being well over the territory, into the boundary of being controlling, smothering, and maybe insensitive to her feelings. Because the fact that he was so shocked that she left him means that he was not aware of how she was feeling up until that point. And I think he recognizes a little bit of that in himself. But there's maybe also a recognition that, like, okay, so there was something of my fault in that, but not something that he really wants to change about himself. If he feels like he knows the right thing to do, he's going to do it, even if she doesn't want him to. He's not going to let her make this mistake, even if she wants him to. Just like he didn't when they were in a relationship. And even though that means, once again, that they'll be apart. But he's been able to be at peace with it this time, because he knows that he's made the decision consciously instead of not realizing that that's what was happening. And so we see he turns them into the police. It's not clear whether they get the bounty. It seems like probably not. Unclear whether they get the bounty for this one. But I would guess, it doesn't matter really. It would matter to the rest of the Bebop. I would think that maybe they do. I don't know. It's not clear. But in any event, as Jet walks away, he looks at this stop, pocket watch, and he decides to throw it into the ocean because he is done letting his heart wait for her to come back. Because the whole concept of the pocket watch was, I'll wait for her until it stops. But then it stopped and he left Ganymede, but he kept the pocket watch. He kept it all these years, and it clearly still meant a lot to him because he was kind of still waiting. Anyway, thinking that time had froze just like the watch. Now he realizes that that's a mistake. She's moved on, and he is able to be a little bit at peace with how that happened and what it meant, and we'll move on. So yeah, is Jet like blameless? Is he the hero, good guy, knight in shining armor? No, not really. But it's complicated, and he's accepting that. And so I think it's interesting. So next time, to follow up this sad character drama based episode, we're going to have the episode entitled Toys in the Attic, where basically it's like an alien parody and there's a weird monster on the Bebop and it's very silly. So we'll be back next week for that. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.